It was a bright, early morning when Darnell Davidson walked into the office of Gregory Montgomery, a billionaire real estate mogul known for his sharp mind and his cold, calculating nature. Gregory's office was just as impressive as the man himself. Polished mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city skyline, and a desk that seemed to dominate the room. But despite all the opulence, the man behind the desk was now visibly nervous. Gregory had never imagined that the past would come knocking on his door in the way it was now. 24 years ago, he had made a decision, one that had seemed simple at the time, but had now, with cruel irony, come back to haunt him. He didn't recognize the young man at first. Darnell stood tall, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his expression unreadable. The man before him was dressed impeccably in a suit that, to Gregory's dismay, cost more than his own. There was a slight resemblance to someone Gregory had once known well, but the connection eluded him. "Can I help you?" Gregory asked, his voice low, though there was no mistaking the tension in his words. He wasn't sure why he was nervous. Perhaps it was the aura of calm that this man radiated, or the unsettling fact that he had been expecting this moment for years. Darnell didn't answer immediately. He simply stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. His eyes met Gregory's, and for the briefest of moments, Gregory felt a sharp pang of guilt. But it was gone almost as soon as it had arrived. Darnell was a stranger to him, a young man with no ties to the past, or so he thought. "My name is Darnell Harris," the man finally said, his voice calm and measured. "You don't know me, Mr. Montgomery, but you know my mother." Gregory's heart skipped a beat. He felt his stomach twist, though he tried his best not to show it. "Your mother?" Gregory asked, trying to keep his composure. But his mind was already racing, the wheels turning as he quickly tried to place the name. Darnell Harris. The last name struck a chord with him, but it wasn't until Darnell spoke again that everything fell into place. "My mother, Ms. Ruth Harris," Darnell continued. "You fired her when she was pregnant with me. You fired her because she wouldn't sleep with you, and after she had me, you erased her from your life. But you can't erase me, Mr. Montgomery." The words hit Gregory like a physical blow. For a moment, he couldn't speak. The room seemed to spin as Darnell's words cut through the years of silence, bringing the past crashing into the present. Gregory Montgomery, the man who had built his empire on ruthless decisions, had made one mistake that had been buried deep in his past. Ruth Harris had been his assistant, a bright, capable woman who had worked for him for years. But when she refused his advances, he had fired her, ending both her career and her life as she knew it. What Gregory hadn't known, though, was that she was pregnant. She had left the company, disappeared into obscurity, and Gregory had never heard from her again. He had assumed she had moved on, found another job, another life. But now, Darnell was here, standing before him, the physical embodiment of his sin. "Why are you here?" Gregory finally managed to ask, though the question felt hollow in his mouth. Darnell stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Gregory's. "I'm here for one thing, Mr. Montgomery," he said coldly. "You're going to pay for what you did." Gregory swallowed hard. He knew this moment was inevitable, but he hadn't expected it to come like this. He thought he had escaped his past, thought he had built a life where he could forget the mistakes he had made. But Darnell Harris was the reminder that no one ever truly escapes the consequences of their actions. Gregory Montgomery sat back in his plush leather chair, his hands gripping the armrests as if they might hold him up. His gaze, now fixed on Darnell Harris, was one of disbelief. The words the young man had spoken still echoed in his mind. "I'm here for one thing, Mr. Montgomery. You're going to pay for what you did." Gregory could feel the weight of those words sinking in, but he refused to show fear. He had built an empire from the ground up by controlling everything around him. People, situations. He bent them to his will. But Darnell? Darnell was different. He was a constant reminder that not even Gregory could control everything. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Gregory finally said, his voice shaky but attempting to maintain some semblance of authority. "I don't know who you think you are, but you're not going to come in here and—" "Don't lie to me," Darnell interrupted, his tone cutting through the air like a knife. He stepped closer to the desk, his presence overpowering. "You know exactly who I am. You know exactly what you did. You think you can get away with it because you've got money and power. But you can't erase me. And you can't erase my mother's pain." Gregory's face turned pale as the reality of the situation began to hit him like a tidal wave. He had tried so hard to forget Ruth Harris and the consequences of his actions. She had been a threat to his ego, his power, and he had disposed of her without a second thought. But now, her son, her flesh and blood, was standing before him, and all the power in the world couldn't change the truth. Darnell's eyes never wavered, locked onto Gregory's as if daring him to deny the past. "My mother," he continued, his voice steady but filled with the weight of years of pain, "she raised me on her own. She worked harder than anyone should have to, and she sacrificed everything just to make sure I had a chance at a better life. And you—" "I didn't know," Gregory whispered, his voice trailing off. "I didn't know she was pregnant." Darnell shook his head slowly, his jaw clenched tightly. "You knew. You knew exactly what you were doing. You fired her because she wouldn't sleep with you. You ruined her career, and you left her to face everything alone. You had the power to change her life. But you chose to break her. You chose to break us." Gregory's hands trembled as he sat forward, his once unshakable confidence now replaced by a deep sense of guilt. The memories of Ruth came rushing back, her pleading for a chance, her refusal to succumb to his advances, her quiet exit from the company. He had thought she would disappear. He had thought he could erase her. But now, Darnell's words had pierced the illusion of control he had carefully built. I didn't know," Gregory said again, his voice weaker this time. He couldn't deny the truth any longer. "I was wrong, Darnell. I was wrong to treat your mother the way I did." Darnell stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Apologies aren't enough, Mr. Montgomery. You can't just apologize for what you did. There are consequences for your actions." Gregory felt a wave of panic. He had spent decades avoiding the consequences of his choices, burying them beneath his wealth and success. But now, for the first time, he could see that those consequences were unavoidable. "What do you want from me?" Gregory asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Darnell took a deep breath, his gaze softening, but his resolve unbroken. "What I want, Mr. Montgomery, is for you to feel the weight of your decisions. I want you to face the people you've hurt, the people you've dismissed. And for once, I want you to see the damage you've done." Gregory closed his eyes, the room suddenly feeling much smaller than before. The walls, once symbols of his power, now seemed to close in around him, suffocating him with the realization that there was no escaping the past. "I'll make it right," Gregory said finally, though the words felt hollow. "I'll make it right." Darnell's gaze softened slightly, but there was no forgiveness in his eyes. "It's too late for that. But it's not too late for you to stop hiding from the truth." With that, Darnell turned and walked toward the door, leaving Gregory Montgomery alone with the weight of the past, the man's final words ringing in his ears like a final judgment. The next few days felt like an endless storm for Gregory Montgomery. Every time he tried to sleep, he saw Ruth's face, her quiet dignity, the pain in her eyes when he dismissed her. The guilt gnawed at him. And now, Darnell's visit had reopened those old wounds, forcing him to confront the man he had become and the choices he had made. As news of Darnell's confrontation spread, the media began to piece together the story of Ruth Harris, the young woman Gregory had fired, pregnant and alone. People began to ask questions. Why had he treated her this way? Why had he so callously ended her career? Gregory's wealth and power were no longer enough to shield him. Shareholders began to question his leadership, and former colleagues distanced themselves. For the first time in decades, Gregory's empire felt fragile, like it could all come crashing down at any moment. Darnell had made sure of that. His every word, every gesture had been calculated. He had ensured that Gregory understood the depth of his actions, not just toward Ruth, but the ripple effects that reached far beyond his personal gain. But for Darnell, it was never about vengeance. It was about forcing Gregory to see the consequences of his arrogance. His mother had suffered, and now it was time for Gregory to feel the weight of that suffering. 2 weeks later, Gregory called Darnell into his office again. This time, his voice was different. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness, but a genuine admission. "I can't undo what I've done," Gregory said quietly, "but I want to make it right." Darnell didn't respond. The silence between them spoke volumes. The past could never be erased, but the future, for the first time, felt uncertain for Gregory. And for Darnell, it felt like justice had finally been served.